disabled boy was brutally attacked by men pretending to be neighborhood enforcers, an unimaginable betrayal of trust in a peaceful community. At the center stood Greg Mason, a jealous and ruthless imposter using fear to control and exploit innocent families. But John Harper's fierce love and relentless courage sparked a chain of events that turned the tables. Just wait until you hear how this shocking confrontation unfolded, and how justice ultimately triumphed against all odds. John Harper was a devoted father, known in his quiet Georgia neighborhood for his unwavering love and fierce protection of his 12-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan was a bright boy, full of gentle curiosity, but he faced daily challenges. Born with a physical disability that required him to use a wheelchair, John's world revolved around making sure Ethan felt safe, happy, and included. Their neighborhood was peaceful, a place where neighbors greeted one another by name and children played freely on sunny afternoons. John often took Ethan outside to enjoy the warmth of the day, watching with quiet pride as his son smiled at the simple joys of life. But on this particular afternoon, the calm was shattered. The sun beat down heavily, casting long shadows across the pavement near their driveway. Ethan was playing quietly, enjoying the gentle breeze, when suddenly 2 men appeared out of nowhere. They were dressed in dark uniforms, their faces set in hard expressions, and both wore badges that read, HOA Security. The badges looked official at a glance, but something about them seemed off. The men announced they were there to enforce neighborhood rules. Their tone was firm, but not openly hostile. Yet there was an underlying tension, a subtle intimidation in the way they spoke. John, hearing their voices, stepped out to see what was happening, his protective instincts immediately alert. He approached calmly but cautiously, asking, "What's the issue here?" The men pointed at Ethan and made a serious accusation: vandalism. John was stunned. Ethan's disability made such behavior impossible. The boy was gentle and incapable of such actions. Still, the men insisted, ignoring John's questions and refusing to explain further. When John tried to intervene and clarify the misunderstanding, one of the men suddenly shoved Ethan roughly. The boy's wheelchair rocked back slightly, and Ethan's face twisted in confusion and pain. Then, in a moment that seemed almost unreal, the man struck Ethan across the cheek. Ethan trembled, his fragile frame visibly shaken. John's heart stopped. The sight of his son, vulnerable and hurt, was more than he could bear. Everything around him seemed to freeze. The peaceful neighborhood, the sunny afternoon, the familiar faces of neighbors who would surely have helped. It was as if the ground beneath him had cracked wide open. John's world shattered in that instant. How could these men, who claimed to protect the community, turn their hands against a child in need? How could they betray the very trust that holds a neighborhood together? John stared in disbelief, pain burning in his chest. This was not just an attack on Ethan. It was an attack on everything John stood for. And in that terrible moment, he realized nothing in their lives would ever be the same. John's shock was only the beginning. As the initial numbness faded, it was quickly replaced by a fierce, burning anger, a hatred that grew with every new piece of information he uncovered. He soon learned the terrifying truth. The men who had come to their neighborhood weren't real security officers. They were imposters, a gang exploiting the trust and fear of the community. The badges they wore were counterfeit, mere props in a dangerous game of intimidation and control. This so-called HOA security was nothing more than a criminal operation designed to bully residents into paying protection fees. John's heart sank as he realized how deep the deception ran. Families who had once felt safe were now living under the shadow of fear, their peaceful lives threatened by these fraudulent enforcers. The mastermind behind it all was a man named Greg Mason. John discovered that Greg held a personal grudge against the neighborhood. Jealous of the calm and stability others enjoyed, he sought to dominate through fear and manipulation. Greg's gang had been terrorizing several families for months, using threats and aggressive tactics to maintain their hold. But harming Ethan, a child who was vulnerable and innocent, was a line no one could accept. For John, it wasn't just a betrayal, it was a call to action. Fueled by an intense resolve, John vowed to bring the impostors to justice and protect his community from further harm. Word spread quickly, and neighbors rallied together, their shared outrage turning into strength. When the gang sensed the rising resistance, they knew their time was running out. They tried to disappear before the community could catch them. One afternoon, John and a group of neighbors confronted the impostors outside the neighborhood park. The air was thick with tension as voices rose and demands for accountability echoed. The impostors, sensing their scheme was unraveling, rushed to their black SUVs. Engines roared and tires screeched as the vehicles sped away, leaving a wake of uncertainty and defiance behind them. John watched the SUVs disappear down the street, his fists clenched in determination. The battle was far from over, but now the community was awake, united, and ready to fight back. John's anger no longer simmered beneath the surface. It exploded into fierce determination. Without hesitation, he grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his voice urgent and steady as he explained the situation, pleading for help. Meanwhile, the impostors, desperate to escape, sped down the highway in their black SUVs, the sun glaring off their tinted windows as they tried to outrun justice. But fate seemed to intervene. From around the next bend, a convoy of official black SUVs appeared, an unmistakable motorcade. It was a Secret Service detail escorting a high-ranking government official through the area. The agents inside immediately sensed something was wrong. The tension in the air was unmistakable. Without hesitation, the Secret Service vehicles moved to block the road ahead, forming an impenetrable barrier. The fake HOA vehicles slammed on their brakes, tires screeching, caught completely off guard and trapped. John's fury burned like a wildfire as he rushed forward to confront Greg Mason and his crew. His voice was steady but fierce, demanding answers, demanding justice. The neighbors, who had gathered behind him, stood firm, their eyes blazing with the same determination. Within moments, police cars arrived, their sirens piercing the tense air. Officers quickly moved in, taking control of the situation. The impostors were handcuffed and led away, their false authority shattered in an instant. The neighborhood erupted into cheers, a wave of relief and triumph washing over everyone. After weeks of fear and uncertainty, the truth was finally exposed, and those who had threatened their peace were held accountable. John looked around at his neighbors, proud, united, and stronger than ever. This was more than a victory over impostors. It was a reclaiming of their community's safety and trust. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, friends, and those who had stood with John and Ethan from the very beginning. The trial was intense, a battle fought with facts, testimonies, and unwavering determination. Greg Mason and his gang faced the full weight of the law, charged with assault, impersonation, and extortion. The evidence was undeniable, and the community's voice was clear. When the verdict was finally announced, it was a resounding victory. Greg and his crew were convicted, held accountable for their actions. Justice had been served. For John and Ethan, the outcome brought more than just legal triumph. They received heartfelt apologies from those who had once doubted them, as well as compensation for the pain and suffering inflicted. Yet, the true victory was intangible, the restoration of peace and trust in their neighborhood. Though Ethan's recovery was ongoing, he found renewed strength in the embrace of a community that refused to let him down. Parents, neighbors, and friends rallied around him, their support a quiet fortress against the shadows of that fateful day. The nightmare brought on by the fake HOA enforcers had ended. What began as a day of shock and fear transformed into a testament to resilience and the power of standing together. John's unwavering love for his son had turned despair into satisfaction, a triumph not just of law, but of humanity. This victory carried a profound message. No matter how vulnerable or overlooked, everyone deserves protection, and no matter how dark the deceit, truth has a way of shining through, bringing justice to light and stopping those who seek to do harm. In the end, the neighborhood wasn't just safe again, it was stronger, united by a shared courage and hope that would never be broken.